Welcome to Sacrilegious Discourse.
For this is what the Sovereign Lord says.
Why do you need prophets to tell people who you are and what you want?
If you can justify everything that the God of the Bible has done, then you can justify any of your behavior.
A lot of this mentality is trickling into what is now mainstream right-wing Christianity.
I am capable of empathy greater than this God of the Bible.
This is a Bible that they tell kids. This is the good Lord. This is the good book. He is fantasizing about murder, mass murder.
Head over to sacrilegiousdiscourse.com right now to find out how to leave us a review or support us on Patreon.
Hey there, sinners and saints. It's your favorite Bible-bashing duo from Sacrilegious Discourse, and we need your help.
That's right, folks. We're raising funds for some heavenly equipment and a studio that doesn't sound like it's in the depths of hell.
Our current setup, let's just say it's more apocalypse than audiophile.
So if you want to hear us dissect the Bible without the background noise of demonic squirrels, chip in a few bucks.
We're aiming for $5,000 to upgrade our audio and build a studio worthy of blasphemous banter.
Donate today and help us spread the good word of atheism.
You can find a link right on our homepage, sacrilegiousdiscourse.com. Every dollar counts.
Even if it's from your collection plate. Husband!
Wife!
What are we doing today?
Well, this is a special episode.
It's a bonus.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah. And we're covering something that kind of came up in our last Discord chat where we were with people and they were talking about stuff when we were talking about the Pope on our last Patreon episode.
Yes.
Now, again, this one's for everybody. So what is it we are talking about today?
We're talking about Pope Joan.
Yeah, Pope Joan
and the Holy Throne.
Okay. And if you don't already join us on Discord, this is done live on Discord every time we do one of these specials, which right now is on Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern.
Correct.
And we are looking to create one on Sundays as a once-a-month type thing at some point very, very soon. So those are what come join us.
Yes.
Be part of it. It's fun.
Come chat with us and make fun of me.
Yeah, you can find a link right on our website, sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, and usually actually in our show notes as well. So check that out. And now, are you ready to talk about Pope Joan?
And the Holy Throne.
And the Holy Throne.
And hole has an E in it because there's a hole in the throne. It is not holy like God-ish.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Okie dokie. All right. We are going to talk about Pope Joan.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a brief little intro and then we're going to pop back a second because then we got to talk about the 9th century.
The 9th century. Okay.
The 9th one.
Yeah.
Not the 8th
the 19th one. Or the, yeah.
No,
okay.
the 9th one.
Yeah.
Popular and enduring legend from the Middle Ages is what Pope Joan is.
Okay.
Very popular, very enduring.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a time when mysticism and the invention of the witch were running rampant.
Okay.
The invention of the witch, not the witch itself.
But what about the Witch of Endor? That was in the early Bible. So witches were around.
They were around, but they weren't haunting them.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Oh, so they were demonized more in this time frame.
But
popularized.
Yeah. Okay. Joan was a woman who, disguised as a man, supposedly rose through the ranks of the Catholic Church and even became pope for a very brief period in the 9th century. Okay. All right. But that's why we got to talk about the 9th century, because what all was going on during that time that such a story would even take root.
I totally forget it. Yeah.
I mean, that was a long time ago. That was well before the Challenger exploded.
Right. Yes, definitely.
Sometime between the Challenger and the dinosaurs.
Yes.
Big window, I know. So I'm going to try to narrow it down for you.
Okay. All right.
So the 9th century was marked by the fragmentation of empires and the spread of new cultures and religions. So it was a messy time period.
Sure.
I mean, that's the Middle Ages, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So here's a couple of different things that were happening during that time. Okay. Charlemagne's Carolingian Empire. I probably said that wrong.
I'm sure you did.
Fuck off. It began to splinter after his death in 814, leading to political instability across much of Western Europe. Okay, so Charlemagne, we all know Charlemagne, right?
Sure.
Not Charlemagne the god, who is a rapper guy today.
Right.
We're talking about like Charlemagne from history.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So he died, and then that was in 814. And so there was like, after that, his empire was like splintering every which way. Okay.
Yeah.
This fragmentation gave rise to the foundations of modern European kingdoms, such as France and Germany. Okay.
All right.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, also during this time period, Viking raids,
Okay.
intensified throughout the century, targeting coastal and inland regions from the British Isles to the Frankish heartland. Frankish heartland being, modern day France, Francophile France, right?
Yeah.
While their influence expanded through raids, trade, and settlement across Europe, reaching as far as Constantinople and North America, and prompting the construction of fortifications and the payment of tribute. So we've got these Viking raids going on, okay, at the same time that like all of these kingdoms are cracking up every which way.
Christopher Columbus was the first one in North America.
I do not want to hear your bullshittery because Trump literally just said he's bringing Christopher Columbus back. And I'm like, you need to fuck off with that bullshit right now. So no, I cannot even.
No, I was just being,
Yeah. So moving on. Fuck that dude. Okay. The Catholic Church was growing in influence during this time, helping to preserve learning and to assert moral authority amid all of this political chaos.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got all these things happening. Feudal structures started to solidify, laying the groundwork for medieval European society. Okay. So, I mean, just try to imagine like all of this mess across the continent is happening.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
In 9th century Europe, many stories and legends circulated orally, like from little town to little town, right?
Yeah.
And they were deeply tied to whatever local culture, religion, and heroic tradition existed, like in their little hamlet. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's some examples. We've got the Charlemagne legends, right?
Sure.
So those were tales of Charlemagne and his knights, especially the Song of Roland.
Okay.
Hold on. Which began forming during this period. These stories glorified Christian knighthood and battles against Muslims in Spain, mixing real events with heroic myth. Okay. So, side note about the Song of Roland.
Yeah.
What does the Song of Roland make you think of?
The Dark Tower series?
Bingo.
By Stephen King?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Side note, the Song of Roland is a heroic poem from the 11th century, though rooted in 9th century oral tradition, which tells of Roland, a knight of Charlemagne, and his noble but tragic last stand at the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass. Okay.
All right.
Now, Robert Browning's poem, Childe Roland, the last line of which reads, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came, which you'll notice I am not reading off of my paper. I just know from my head.
Right.
Is inspired in part by those medieval legends, including the Song of Roland and Shakespeare's reference to Childe Roland in his play King Lear. Okay, so we've got the Song of Roland, which was just some like oral story that eventually got written down in the 11th century. Okay, so it was talked about and passed around in the 9th century, finally written down in the 11th century.
Yeah.
Right. Then we've got Robert Browning seeing all that shit and writing a poem called Childe Roland. Okay. And the Song of Roland.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Stephen King's Dark Tower series is explicitly inspired by Browning's poem. And King blends the heroic archetype and tragic nobility from the Song of Roland and the eerie tone and symbolic quest from Browning's poem, as well as Western gunslinger imagery to create his unique mythos. And he has said that that line that I recited, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came, haunted him, just stuck with him. And that one line alone is what inspired him to start the
whole series.
Yeah. The first line of which is something to the effect of, the man in black sped across the desert and the gunslinger followed.
Right.
Like that's the first line of the gunslinger. I paraphrase it. I think I got it wrong, but it's something to that effect.
Sure.
So anyway, that fascinates me because I'm a huge fan of Stephen King in general and the Dark Tower series in particular. But anyway, so 9th century, going back to that, right? We've got the Charlemagne legends, which is, where the Song of Roland started.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we've got Arthurian legends, which also plays a piece in
the Dark
Tower.
Period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Early forms of the King Arthur myth were circulating in Britain and Brittany, though they weren't yet the romanticized versions of later centuries. And by romanticized, I don't mean like lovey-dovey hearts. I mean romanticized as in like heroicism and chivalry and honor code, stuff like that.
Right.
That's romanticism. So
Yeah.
they weren't yet the romanticized versions of later centuries. Tales of warrior king defending Britain from invaders were already known during this time. Okay, so we've got Charlemagne's legends, we've got Arthurian legends, all of this stuff brewing, not finalized, obviously, as we know them today, but they were just brewing.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got saints' lives. The Christian church promoted the lives and miracles of saints like Saint Benedict, Saint Cuthbert, another name that we know from the Dark Tower series, and Saint Martin of Tours. Martin?
Yeah.
Dark Tower?
Right.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Did I say I was a fan of the Dark Tower series?
You might have mentioned
I did. Yeah. These stories spread moral lessons and reinforced Christian values across the continent. Okay. So we've got all that early Stephen King mythos.
And it occurs
history
to me
brewing.
that without that time period, we wouldn't have, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
Was it worth it? Yes.
Obviously, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about 9th century Christianity. Okay, because that's like where we're headed with all of this, right? So religion in 9th century Europe was dominated by Christianity, especially in the West. And it played a very powerful role in shaping both politics and daily life. One might even say that politics and daily life were kind of the same, right?
Okay. Yeah.
The Christianization of Europe, partly pagan regions in general, particularly in Eastern Europe and Scandinavia, were slowly being converted. So that was happening. Okay.
Yeah.
The power of the Catholic Church. The Pope and church leaders were influential both spiritually and politically. Like they were, in charge, large and in charge.
Well, if nothing else was really running shit well, then that leaves the church to take that place, fill that gap.
Yeah, exactly. Pope Nicholas I, who reigned from 858 to 867. And it feels weird that we're in the 80s because when we're reading
forward.
like when we're reading the Bible, we always say BCE.
Yeah.
And so like I have to do the math. Like I got used to doing like the math backwards and now I'm having to do it regular.
Yeah.
So Pope Nicholas I, who reigned from 858 to 867, asserted papal authority, and the church was a key stabilizing force amid the fragmentation of that French empire, Charlemagne's empire that I mispronounced earlier, that was crumbling.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we've got monasticism. Okay. Monasteries were vital centers of learning, agriculture, and culture in general. The rule of Saint Benedict guided monastic life, and monks preserved classical texts through careful copying, making monasteries the intellectual strongholds.
Sure.
Like they were your librarians of the day,
Yeah. No, and I think, honestly, a lot of that is the reason why there is such a strong force that is the church. Like these things built up from a very... They held societies together at some points in history.
They were the only organized force at the time, and therefore they were able to hold it together and therefore to hold their own history to account.
Right.
So then we've got I'm going to pronounce this, the filioque, the filioque controversy. And that was the theological dispute between the Eastern and Western churches over the phrase "and the Son" in the Nicene Creed, Okay.
Okay.
The Father and the Son.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got the Eastern, which is the Byzantine, and the Western, which is the Latin, and they're arguing over this.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that strained relations and foreshadowed the eventual Great Schism in 1054. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that was what that split was about or how it started, but yeah, that was definitely a precursor.
Right.
So
right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, then we've got relics, saints, and pilgrimages.
Okay.
Okay, so the veneration of relics and saints was common, with pilgrimage routes forming to places like Rome in Italy, Santiago de Compostela, and local shrines in all the little towns and hamlets. Like, oh, so-and-so died here, Saint such and such passed by and ate dinner here. And it's interesting because we still do that in America, but with celebrities. Like, oh my God, this is the inn that Elvis stayed at, right?
Right.
Or
right.
this is the hotel the Overlook was filmed at, in The Shining.
Sure.
Right? Like, we still do that to this day.
Yeah.
But they're not called pilgrimages. They're just called, like, tours.
No, you could pilgrimage to something like that if it depended on how reverent you felt about it. Like
Sure.
a lot of people feel very much that like going to visit like Elvis things is a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Because they feel so strongly about Elvis things.
And so they take a tour.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel very strongly about visiting places that are related to like the Wizard of Oz. Because, there's a park that used to exist that's closed down, but you can still see the remnants of it. I would love to go there. You can see the house where the original Dorothy Gale where
she lived.
Yeah, where L. Frank Baum based his story on.
Okay.
And then also the town where Judy Garland, the actress who portrayed Dorothy in the movie, you can see the house that she grew up in the town where she was from.
See, I feel like you could call those pilgrimages if you were.
You could
to go on a specific tour of those things. And,
they're personal pilgrimages, though.
Sure,
and that's the difference. Because whereas these were very personal trips, they were personal to each person on a regular route that everybody took together.
Yeah.
So it's not the same. And also a pilgrimage implies religiosity. Sure. So these I would more call tours, because you're not like doing this and, treading the path that many have trod before you, to go see this mystical thing that's going to make you feel attuned to the universe or what the fuck ever.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just speaking off the cuff here. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I don't know. I would call a tour different from a pilgrimage personally.
Okay.
But that's just, it's personal taste.
Sure.
So you call it what you want to call it.
I will.
I know you will. These journeys, another word,
yes,
were acts of piety and spiritual devotion, often tied to miracle stories.
Okay.
So I still say a trip to see where Elvis was is not a pilgrimage. You can call it that, but I don't think that's what it was.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So here's some belief structures that existed during this time period.
Yeah.
Okay. Despite the growing dominance of Christianity in 9th century Europe, mysticism, magic, and remnants of pagan beliefs persisted.
I'm shocked.
I know. You mean as they do today? Holy shitballs. Especially in rural areas and newly converted regions.
Those damn rural areas.
Yeah. So we've got folk magic and healing. That was common. People often relied on charms, herbal remedies, and traditional healers, which were sometimes called the cunning folk. They relied on them for protection, health, and fertility. And these practices blended older pagan customs with newer Christian rituals and created a kind of folk religion, so like a little local belief thing happening.
Yeah.
Which, again, something we still do to this day.
Right.
We do hardcore. Yeah.
But I feel like it was a lot more, like, you would have found a lot more, they were not as in touch with the greater society. Because these places were very secluded.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have had the ability to source their ideas out anywhere. So.
No, it's true. It would have been more like this is a fact back then, whereas now it's just like a fad because Madonna did it or some shit like that, you know, like that kind of thing.
Sure.
So then we've got pagan gods and spirits. In Scandinavia and parts of Eastern Europe, belief in Norse, Slavic, and Germanic gods still remained very strong. Okay. Mm-hmm. People worship deities like Odin, Thor, Perun, and other gods and goddesses of that time through rituals, sacrifices, and festivals that were tied to the seasons.
Sure.
So that still was a thing.
Yeah.
Then we've got Christian syncretism. Okay. The church often absorbed pagan traditions rather than eliminating them outright. Think like your Easter kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Pagan holidays were repurposed as Christian feast days, like All Saints Day replaced Samhain.
Okay.
And, you know, that's tied to Halloween.
Right.
And that is not to be confused with All Hallows Eve, which is also tied to Halloween, but is separate.
Okay.
One of them is like the night before Halloween. One of them is Halloween itself. One of them is the day after Halloween. And then one of them is the day after that.
Okay.
So we've got 4 separate things that we just tied all of them and said, it's Halloween period. And people that don't know any better are like, it's all Halloween.
And that's why Ohio can never decide what night they're going to hold trick or treat on.
Well, yeah. And part of that is because if it falls on a Wednesday, this is a very churchy area, like church belt kind of thing. Yeah. So people go to church Wednesday nights.
Right.
If it falls on a Friday, we've got high school football. And if it falls on a Saturday or Sunday, well, we've got church on Sunday.
Right.
So you can't do it Saturday night because, you know, you got to get up early the next day. And you can't do it Sunday because that's a holy day.
Got it.
So that really limits you to Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday.
Got it.
That's when we usually have our trick-or-treat night, which we call Beggar's Night. Yeah. In Ohio.
Yeah.
Never heard it any of the other places I've lived, ever.
Right.
But we have a Beggar's Night, which may or may not fall on Halloween.
Right.
It's very interesting. All right, so then we've got fear of witchcraft and the supernatural brewing.
Okay. Yeah.
While formal witch hunts wouldn't start until much later, people in the 9th century feared curses, omens, and demons. Like, remember last week we talked about like the evil eye and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was also a bonus episode.
Right.
Church authorities condemned sorcery, but also contributed to belief in the supernatural through stories of saints battling devils or using miracles. So they were both. They were like, "Nuh-uh, magic totally doesn't exist." And then they were like, "Oh, magic exists, but it's so evil. And, you know, you have to use God and his, like, heroes and representatives to, like, kill the magic."
With God magic.
With God magic. Yeah, exactly. So they had it both ways. The church tried to have it both ways.
Right.
Yeah, as they always do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we've got mysticism and visions. Within Christianity itself, mysticism was present in the form of visions, divine dreams, and ecstatic experiences. Ecstatic.
Okay. All right.
Monks and nuns might report mystical encounters, often interpreted as divine revelations or battles with evil spirits. Yeah.
Okay.
They were duking it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we've got all that happening. Okay. So that was just like a general 9th century overview. Let's talk about like women and how they fit into the 9th century.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Women in the 9th century occupied complex and varied roles within religious and spiritual life, often more active and influential than formal history tends to credit. And even though I had to include that note, I just want to point out, but still not where it should have been. Like, let's not romanticize that women did have leadership positions or what the fuck ever. Okay.
Sure.
I don't even a little bit want to pretend that women held roles of equality to their male counterparts. Fuck you if you want me to believe that.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So their roles differed across Christian, pagan, and folk traditions, of course.
Yeah.
So Christian women in the church, women could become nuns, abbesses, or anchoresses, which were female hermits. So think, your silent monk or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Abbesses like Hildegard of Bingen, a bit later, held significant spiritual and even political power. Huh?
Okay.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Some women, excuse me, some women were canonized as saints and venerated for their piety, miracles, or martyrdom.
Okay.
So, found that very interesting.
Yeah.
Then we've got mystics and visionaries. This kind of gets a little wonky.
Okay.
Although rare, some women were recognized as having divine visions or mystical experiences. These women were sometimes revered as spiritual authorities or intermediaries, like not a prophet, mind you.
Right.
But, if they were boys, there would have been a prophet because, God's mouthpiece, right? No, but they're intermediaries, which is what a prophet is.
Yeah,
right?
except for they got to give it a different name because it's not a man.
Girl.
Yeah,
vag.
There's no penis involved.
No, there's vag.
Right.
No penis and vag.
Yeah, okay.
Yikes.
Got it.
But these women, by, doing that, being claimed that, or being labeled that, they also risk suspicion or accusations of heresy.
So, okay. So you got to be careful. It's a fine line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Right.
Okay. So then we've got folk healers and wise women in both pagan and Christian.
But not wise guys.
Never be a wise guy. In both pagan and Christian rural communities, women were often the keepers of folk medicine, midwifery, and local magical traditions.
Midwifery. It just sounds like you're up to no good.
I know. Even though it's just like delivering babies. But midwifery. Like, what are you doing, you midwifery fuck? These quote-unquote wise women used herbs, charms, and rituals to heal and protect, and were both respected and feared. Yeah. Sounds like they were witches, doesn't it?
I mean,
Yeah, the beginnings thereof, right?
Right. You can't have those women get too powerful, So.
Yeah, no. Actually, there was some documentary that I want to do a complete deep dive on that talked about how the whole reason that the witch hunts began were because wise women and midwives were more trusted, valued, and knowledgeable even than their male counterpart doctors. And so, you can't have that. And so the boys got really pissed and were like, they're not doing religion good, and they have vaginas, so they're like even bad, and let's kill them, burn them. Yeah. So, you label it a witch, and then, all of a sudden it means something different.
Sure.
So I found that really interesting, and I was like, you don't say.
Right.
Yeah. So we've got pagan priestesses and seeresses. Okay. Yeah. In Norse culture especially, these women were female shamans who performed rituals, foretold the future, and communed with the spiritual world. We still got some of those to this day.
I mean, yeah.
Right?
There's one down the street. So,
although I haven't seen the sign out lately, and I wonder if they closed. I wonder if the church that was 2 doors down got them shut down. These women were held revered, and they held feared roles, and they often traveled from village to village. So they were basically wise women.
Okay. Yeah.
And once again, women aren't allowed to be wise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So then we've got demonization and control. Okay. And this is what happens when women get too smart, get too uppity.
Okay. Yeah.
As Christianity spread, some independent spiritual roles held by women, especially those involving magic, healing, or prophecy, which were often like one and the same, began to be viewed with suspicion. Get them.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
We are getting to Pope Joan.
We are.
Okay,
but I'm just trying to
I was
lay
was just checking.
Okay, first I had to explain the 9th century, okay? Then I had to explain women in the 9th century.
No, I
understand why it's important.
I only asked because this is a long trek to get there, so I was just like kind of curious if this was leading to. Obviously, it's leading to Pope Joan.
Literally the next page, asshole.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
one more point.
Okay.
Yeah, like actually, not even one more point. Like the last sentence of the point I'm currently fucking making.
Got it. Wow,
yeah.
Bad timing on my part.
Bad timing on your part. Yeah. Okay. So anyway. These bitches that were too uppity and smart for their own good began to be viewed with suspicion. Church teachings increasingly warned against women's quote-unquote weaker nature. And some older female traditions were rebranded as witchcraft.
Oh, okay.
Superstition.
Right.
Demon.
Yeah.
Worship.
Because women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, snakes and fucking apples and shit, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I've got a note that says, back to Pope Joan.
Ah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Pope Joan.
It would have been funnier had you not, like, done your thing.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So the most common versions of the Pope Joan story go like this. Okay?
Yeah.
This is, like, the main story. Okay? Joan was a highly intelligent and learned woman, very educated, who, in order to pursue education and a life beyond the, at the time, limited roles typically available to women, disguised herself as a man. Okay?
All
So
right.
first she disguised herself as a man. Under a male name, which is usually talked about as being John Anglicus, she entered monastic life, and her intellectual abilities allowed her to climb the ecclesiastical hierarchy.
Okay. Yeah.
Eventually, due to her reputation for piety and scholarship, she was elected pope, supposedly taking the name John VIII. And this is often placed around the year 855 AD, right between the reigns of Pope Leo IV and Pope Benedict III.
Okay. All right.
Joan is said in these stories to have reigned for about 2 years before she was found out.
Got it.
As pope, she allegedly kept her gender hidden until she became pregnant.
Whoa.
That'll do it.
Pregnant pope, huh?
Yeah. Possibly due to a relationship she had with a close companion, which I was like, yeah, pretty fucking close.
If she was pregnant,
so close that his penis touched her. That's pretty fucking close, right?
Yeah.
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 So the dramatic climax of the story involves her secret being revealed. So not when she got pregnant, but when she gave birth. Wait.
The Pope's putting on some weight there, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have, papal robes and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, all the popes were poping it up, and they were all fucking around and saying that they weren't, and they were all eating and drinking and grifting. They were all probably fat, right? Yeah. So the getting pregnant part wasn't the problem. You can always claim fatitude, right?
Sure.
But you give birth during a papal procession. That's not good.
Fly. Yeah.
No. Nope. So here's the thing, okay? There's lots of different stories about this whole how the birth happened. Okay. Yeah, this is
how the birth. Okay.
How the birth proceeded.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
One says she gave birth mid-procession and the horse didn't stop. So in many versions of the story, Joan went into labor while riding a horse during a grand papal procession between the Colosseum and St. John Lateran.
Okay.
And the punchline is that the horse just kept trotting.
Got it.
It just kept moving. Okay. Yeah. She allegedly gave birth right there in the middle of the street while the entire Roman crowd looked on in shock. Medieval storytellers leaned into this and passed that story around. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one version of the story. Okay. The second version, this one's even better.
Yeah.
The baby fell out.
It just fell out.
And she died of shame. As you do when you're a woman, Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some stories say the baby literally fell out of her and the crowd stoned her to death on the spot.
Oh my God.
Others say she just died of embarrassment, as if the shame of a surprise street birth was just too much. Too much. I cannot.
But all the stories agree that this happened during a procession.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They all agree on this.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just how it happens during the procession.
Okay.
That is the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's another story about it.
Okay. Yeah.
For centuries, papal processions supposedly avoided the street where this happened near the church of San Clement. And this road actually exists.
Okay.
Everything about the thing actually exists except for,
The
her.
Pope. Right. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, for centuries, papal processions supposedly avoided that street because of the scandal. Some stories say it was dubbed Via Papessa, the Popes Street, and popes would detour to avoid the bad juju.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if that aspect of it is true.
Probably.
Because, I mean, the story, even though probably not true, right? I don't know the rest of what you're covering, but I mean...
Right.
Even though it's not true,
the myth is strong.
The myth could be strong.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another story states that she wasn't officially buried. According to some tellings, because she was considered such an embarrassment to the church, Joan was buried in an unmarked grave, and the church pretended she never existed. And there are still conspiracy theories to this day about that. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
You got to get into those Vatican archives, right?
Oh, my God. Right? Like, what would you pay? Right? And it's probably, like, nothing to be found there. Like, we've built it up over the years as, like, this great secret. Yeah. And it's probably, like, fucking boring as fuck.
Yeah,
this point.
Yeah, who knows?
Like, oh, look, the FBI and CIA were involved in having Kennedy killed. We never knew.
I don't think the stuff that they would have secrets on wouldn't be anything so modern. I don't think. Yeah. It would be older stuff that would be interesting to find in those
the historical
records they've got.
Yeah.
So
here's another thing. During the Reformation, Protestants had a field day with the whole story.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
One particularly gleeful Protestant historian wrote, "Only the Pope was infallible unless he was also pregnant." And the whole legend became a kind of gotcha joke aimed at undermining papal authority. Okay. Which we'll get back to in just a second.
Sure.
Okay. Then there's like another kind of story that's like, she might have given birth to twins.
Okay.
Because one wasn't enough, right?
Yeah, you gotta up that story, You gotta keep making it better and more.
All right. So we've got through the story of Pope Joan now, okay? Yeah. Generally.
Right.
Next comes the aftermath. Accounts of what happened next vary after she gave birth. Some say she died in childbirth. Okay. Others claim she was stoned to death, as we mentioned, by an angry mob once her true sex was revealed. Having a baby fly out your vag is going to do it.
That will do it, yeah.
And in some versions, she simply was deposed and lived out her day in penance.
Okay.
So she wasn't necessarily killed in these stories.
Got it.
Okay. That's the happy version.
Right.
So, historical basis. Let's talk about, did this really happen?
Right.
And TLDR, no. Okay. Right. So there's no contemporary evidence. The crucial point is that there's no reliable contemporary historical evidence to support the existence of a female pope. Okay. Yeah. The story's first appearance was in chronicles in the 13th century, several hundred years after the supposed events.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, meh. Then we've got chronological issues. The purported reign of Pope Joan often overlaps with the very extremely well-documented reigns of Pope Leo IV and Benedict III, as I mentioned earlier, in the mid-9th century, making her existence chronologically problematic and extremely questionable at best.
Sure.
So then...
do you know if there was a long gap between, was there a...
No.
No?
No.
Okay. All right. Got it.
At least not according to records that we can find today.
Okay.
Right. As well as we can rely on the records of that time.
I was going to say, if you want to play conspiracy theorist, you could be like, the church might have altered those. So.
Sure, absolutely. But all the records of that time all agree.
Sure.
And they are all from different sources.
Okay. All right.
So
fair enough.
That kind of makes us think, I don't know about all this.
That makes sense.
I don't know about this Pope Joan stuff.
Right.
Okay. So it's very likely a legend. Most modern historians consider Pope Joan to be a fictional figure, a product of medieval storytelling, possibly an allegory fueled by anti-papal satire or folk tales.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may have been intended as satire or a morality tale about clerical corruption or the roles of women in the church. And we're going to get into that in a minute.
Sure.
Too.
Okay.
So the next section I have here is, so if it's so widely accepted as untrue, why did the story stick?
Yeah.
From the 9th century.
Because it's like, I mean...
It's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool story. And,
It is.
and you could look at it from a couple different perspectives, like whether you support women being in charge in the church or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could take it either way as something that you would want to tell the story. Like, if you're not for it, you'd be like, look at this silly thing that happened. Look at this ridiculous thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are for it, you'd be like, well, look, a woman was able to be pope. You know, like, so
Right.
either way...
And-
it could be something that
and
persists.
that gets into why it persisted.
Right.
Because it depends who was telling the story, and everybody was telling the story. So they all had reasons for why to tell the story.
Yeah.
And that tells you why the story kept
Well,
persisting.
and if it were true, then, you know, it's quite the scandal
Right.
for that time period.
Exactly,
You know?
exactly.
Well, actually, it'd be a scandal for this time period, honestly.
Fuck yeah, it would. Yeah. Despite the lack of historical evidence, the story of Pope Joan was widely believed for centuries and became a popular subject in literature and art. Okay. And several reasons for its endurance have been suggested. One is a social commentary. The tale could have served as a commentary on the perceived flaws or moral failings of the church. So if the Catholics were telling it, here's their perspective, okay?
Yeah, right.
A reason to keep women out of leadership positions. Women aren't
Because
supposed
they're
to...
obviously going to have a baby on the way through the procession.
Obviously.
Yeah, that can't happen.
What they'd say is women aren't supposed to be in these roles. See what happened here? She fooled us, but her body, by betraying her, revealed the truth.
Yeah.
Women are just not supposed to be in this role.
Right.
You know?
Right. God made a baby fall out during a procession.
I mean, yeah, something like that. But Protestants would say that it's a reason to hold the Vatican in suspicion. So they're telling the story saying, see what they're hiding? If they'll suppress this information, what else aren't they telling us?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And if even a piece of shit woman, right? If even a woman can ascend to the papacy, who couldn't? Why, even the devil himself could sit on that throne. You know what they say? If two people of the same gender get married, what happens next? Tractors fucking wagons? Ducks fucking dogs? What the hell?
Yeah, you just can't be sure.
Right?
You know? I mean...
If a woman ascends to the papacy, obviously the devil can.
Right.
Right? Like, that's their, like, clutching pearls outrage.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Modern feminists have also adopted this story because they like it.
Yeah,
you know? She's been adopted as a model and icon of what women would be able to achieve in the church.
Okay.
Could be allowed.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it could be used as a story of strength for women.
Yes.
You know, like if that were allowed to exist outside of the mockery of what happened.
Exactly.
So, you know,
exactly. So again, it just depends on who is telling the story as to why they let the story persist. But the fact that so many different people had reasons gives you an idea.
Yeah.
There were many folk tale elements to it. So the story has dramatic elements of disguise, ambition, and a shocking revelation. And that makes it like a great rumor story.
Sure,
we love a compelling narrative.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
Spill the tea, right? Like, that's still a thing.
Right.
Then there's misinterpretation of history or rituals. So some theories suggest the legend might have originated from misinterpretations of certain historical events or unusual papal rituals.
Okay.
So these are largely speculative because I'm not sure. How the fuck do you misinterpret there was a woman that ascended to the papacy?
Yeah, and also how do you determine which papacy rituals are odd?
Was it the giving birth? Was that the odd part?
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm like they're all fucking odd.
Yeah. Like, I don't know about all that.
Right.
So again, TLDR, no, there was no Pope Joan.
Sure.
But it's a cool story, bro.
Yeah.
But I did promise that we would talk about the Holy Pope throne.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the Holy Pope throne has a space to feel for popey testicles. Okay. It's called the infamous pierced chair.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's often linked to the legend of Pope Joan. Okay.
Interesting.
Yes. The story
but
goes...
who's the person that has to reach through and check the Pope's...
I'll get there.
Okay.
Yep, I will get there.
Okay.
The story goes that after the supposed embarrassment of accidentally electing a woman pope, the Catholic Church instituted a ritual to verify the new pope's sex.
Okay.
After a pope was elected, he would sit on a special chair with a hole in the seat like a toilet. A designated cardinal
oh my God.
would reach up through the hole
my God.
and feel the Pope's genitals
oh my God.
to confirm he was biologically male. The cardinal would then reportedly declare in Latin, duos habet et bene pendentes.
He has balls?
He has two and they hang well.
Oh my God.
Yes, yes.
Is this a real thing that happened? Like, is this something that the church actually did? Did you dig into it that much?
I will get there in a second.
Okay.
Okay. So that phrase is either like hilarious or horrifying, depending.
Yes.
I think it's both, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah. No credible documentation from papal inauguration rituals supports that this test ever happened. However, like I had to get through that sentence as fast as possible to tack on the however. This is going to blow your fucking mind. Ready?
Okay.
The supposed chairs with holes, the Holy Pope throne. Yeah. They do exist.
Really?
Yes. There are two that you can find today.
No shit.
You can visit in museums. Yes.
Huh.
There's one in the Vatican museums and there's one in the Lateran Palace.
Interesting.
Most scholars now, however, believe that they were Roman birthing stools or commodes of some kind that were repurposed or misunderstood and attributed to the Joan Pope story.
But I love the story.
Right?
Like, and the fact that they have a
phrase.
Yeah, there's a phrase built into it. Like, that needs to be like a satire short film on something. Like, yeah, that's fantastic.
That's my new cuss phrase I'm going to say.
The Pope ball checker, you know? Like, I mean, what?
I have to memorize this. Duos habet et bene pendentes. You're a pendentes. Okay. The tale became widespread in the 13th century. Yeah. Often used by anti-papal or satirical writers, like satirical writers say The Onion or Saturday Night Live, right?
Yeah.
Of the time.
Except during the Dark Ages.
As a jab at church authority.
Right.
There is no evidence in Vatican liturgy, canon law, or official ceremony of such a physical test ever being part of the papal installation process, but it's so fucking fun to imagine.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna totally just make that something that they did in my mind because it's so much better.
It's so much better. So why the Pope throne story being a thing and existing and still persisting is my question, right?
Because it's fucking fun.
It's funny as fuck. Yeah. Like, do we need a better reason?
No.
It was scandalous, memorable, and it served as a neat little punishment tale for the story of Pope Joan. So, a nice little like P.S.
Yeah, P.S. Now we grab the Pope's balls because of you.
Because of women. Fucking women. Yeah. It also played into medieval humor and distrust of church hierarchy.
Okay.
So it was a way to like make the church look stupid.
Sure.
And medieval humor is a thing much renowned. Like, they were so crass.
I'm going to ask this again. The church needed help looking stupid, though?
Right.
I'm just,
Yeah. Especially in Protestant or anti-clerical circles, they were like,
right. Yeah.
The modern view is today the overwhelming consensus, again, among historians is that Pope Joan is a legend. Cannot say this enough.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, I got it.
Did not exist.
Real.
But the holy thrones do exist.
Sort of. Maybe.
No, they do exist.
Yeah, but you said they may have been reinterpreted, like they may have been misinterpreted.
But they do exist.
Those chairs are there.
Yes.
Okay.
While the story is captivating and has had a significant cultural impact, I mean, just on our household alone, it is not considered a factual event in the history of the papacy.
Okay.
The end.
Well, that is interesting.
That is fun.
I can't get the imagery out of my head now the Pope chair.
Duos habet, something pendente.
Right, yeah.
Bene pendente.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got anything else for us about Pope Joan, or was that it?
I want her to have been real.
I mean,
and I want the chair to have been for that purpose.
I do want the chair to have been for that. Like that alone.
Yeah.
That's so worth it.
Oh, I do want to say that there are some movies that do portray this as though it existed. And there is a novel, somewhat contemporary, like of modern day.
Is it by Dan Brown?
No. I forget who it's by. It's some woman though.
Oh, okay.
Like it's a name that we would know, and I can't remember who.
Got it.
But there are 2 movies and a novelization of this event happening that I cannot wait to get my hands on, so to speak. I would like to, tinkle them with my hands.
We brought up Monty Python earlier. I feel like they need to come back to do a skit about the Pope chair because damn, that's
opportunity missed.
Right? Yeah. I'm just saying. All right. I think that's all we have today for Pope Joan.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yes.
And we will be back hopefully tomorrow with our next episode. If not, soon.
Which is chapter 8, question mark?
That's right. Yeah, we've been really slacking on the regular episodes, so we apologize. But we are trying to get back on some sort of a schedule. And
mostly it's your fault
It is
time.
mostly, yeah, it is. It is. My schedule is really just fucked right now.
It's just fucked right now, you guys.
And I'm sorry about that.
I also am sorry that your schedule is fucked.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Hey, wife, I guess that's the end?
But husband, that's just sad.
It doesn't have to be. We are on lots of social media platforms like Twitter. Our handle there is sacrilegious_D.
For D's nuts.
Oh my God. Stop doing that. Anyway, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. There's a link to all of our social media sites at our website.
Ooh, we have a website?
Yeah, it's sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, where you can also find a link to our merch shop.
We have a merch shop?
Yep, we have podcast-themed clothing, mugs, notebooks, and more, as well as an atheist and science-themed products.
Wow, our fans should really go check that out right now.
Definitely. They can get in touch with us by sending an email to sacrilegiousdiscourse@gmail.com. But before they do that, we could really use some help.
Oh yeah? With what?
Well, it's not free running the podcast, and we need some financial support in order to get better equipment, which will free up time so we can concentrate on our podcast and our fans.
Okay, so what should they do?
Head over to patreon.com/sacrilegious discourse and sign up as a contributor on our podcast. Supporters there receive additional bi-weekly episodes that we record just for our Patreon members for as little as $2 a month.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using.
And Apple Podcast reviews help us out tremendously.
Like and subscribe. Leave an Apple review. Join us on Twitter. Support us on Patreon. That's a lot of instructions. Don't forget to say thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.